I still remember the exact texture of the couch. It was a pale gray velvet, the kind that catches lint and holds the smell of other people's anxiety. I was 16, and my mother had just installed it in her new office, the one with the skylight and the white noise machine, and the diplomas on the wall that all said Dr. Elaine Voss, but might as well have said Dr. Performance. She told me it was a safe space. She told me that everything I said in this room would stay between us, like a secret pressed between the pages of a book that only she and I would ever read. I believed her. I was 16, and she was my mother, and the couch was soft, and I needed so badly for someone to listen that I never thought to ask what she was writing in her leather notebook. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you are new here, my name is Tessa, and what I am about to tell you is a story about the theft that happens in plain sight, with a nod and a smile and a voice so gentle you do not realize it is stripping you bare. If you have ever trusted someone with your worst memory and watched them turn it into content, stay with me. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and listen until the end. Because this story does not end with therapy. It ends with the bill coming due. Here is my story. I was born into a family where feelings were inventory. My mother, Elaine Voss, did not have children. She had case studies. She did not cook dinner. She curated environments for optimal development. She did not tuck me in at night. She conducted bedtime mindfulness exercises that she later transcribed into articles for parenting magazines. I was not her daughter. I was her proof of concept. By the time I was 12, I understood that our house was a stage. The kitchen was a set for conversations about healthy attachment. The living room was a backdrop for photographs that appeared on her Instagram with captions about the sacred work of motherhood. My father had left when I was 4, not because he did not love me, but because he could not compete with the audience my mother had built. He moved to Oregon and became a carpenter. I still have a table he made. Elaine used it in a video about creating spaces for connection, without mentioning that the man who built it had fled her spotlight. When I turned 14, I started breaking. Not dramatically, quietly. The way a bone breaks inside the body, invisible until the pressure becomes too much. I stopped eating some days. I started cutting others. I swallowed pills from her medicine cabinet, not enough to die, just enough to make the world soft and distant and bearable. Elaine found me once, in the bathroom, wrist bleeding into the sink. She did not call an ambulance. She sat on the floor with me, held a towel to my arm, and said, "Tessa, we are going to get through this together. I am going to help you." And then she opened her notebook and started writing. I thought she was documenting my pain so she could heal it. I did not know she was cataloging it so she could sell it. The first time I heard my own words come out of someone else's mouth, I was 19. I was home from my first semester of college, sitting in the kitchen, making tea. Elaine was in her office, recording her podcast. The door was open, and her voice drifted out like smoke, soft and therapeutic and utterly familiar. There was a patient, a young woman who described her depression as a house with no doors. She lived in every room but could never leave. She told me that some days she sat in the kitchen of that house and stared at a knife, not because she wanted to use it, but because it was the only thing that looked real. I dropped the mug. It shattered on the tile, because those were my words. I had said them to her 3 years earlier on the gray velvet couch at 3 in the morning, crying so hard I could not breathe. I had said them to my mother in a room that was supposed to be sacred, and now they were a podcast episode sponsored by a meditation app. I walked into her office. She was wearing headphones, facing the microphone, and she did not see me at first. When she turned, her expression did not flicker. It was the same face she used for difficult clients. Warm, concerned, professionally empathetic. "Tessa," she said, "I am recording. That was my story, that was my house, my kitchen, my knife." She took off the headphones, she smiled. "I changed your name, I changed details, it is a composite. You used my exact words, you used my metaphor. Artists borrow, Tessa. Therapists synthesize. What you shared with me was raw material. I shaped it into something that could help thousands of people. You should be proud." "Proud, you sold my suicide note as a bedtime story." Her smile hardened just at the edges. "Do not be dramatic. I am building a career that supports both of us. You benefit from this. You live in this house. You eat this food. You go to that college because of my work." I left the room. I did not leave the house. I was 19 and I had nowhere else to go, and she was right about the money. I hated that she was right. I hated that my survival was tied to her performance of my pain. I told myself it was an isolated incident. I told myself she had used one story, one time, and now she would stop. I was very good at telling myself things that were not true. It was a skill I had learned from her. For the next 7 years, I stayed away as much as I could. I finished college. I moved to a city 2 hours away. I got a job as an editorial assistant at a small press, reading manuscripts that no one else wanted, correcting commas in novels about vampires and space wars and love affairs that felt more real than anything in my life. I went to therapy with a woman named Dr. Patel, who had no podcast, no book deal, no leather notebook. She had a cramped office and a cat that slept on the filing cabinet and a rule that she never wrote while I was speaking. She taught me that therapy could be quiet, that it could be boring, that it could be mine. But I could not fully escape Elaine. She was everywhere. Her first book, The Wounded Healer, was a bestseller for 40 weeks. It was filled with case studies about adolescent girls who had survived self-harm, addiction, parental abandonment. Each one was me, fragmented and renamed. The girl who stole her mother's pills, the girl who carved words into her thigh, the girl who wrote letters to a dead brother she never had. Elaine had taken my journal entries, my session transcripts, my poems, and woven them into a narrative of maternal redemption. She was the hero. I was the raw material. Her second book, Holding Space, was about mothers who stayed. It used my father's departure as a case study in paternal failure, reframing Elaine's control as devotion. Her third book, The Architecture of Trust, was a direct transcript of my therapy sessions from ages 16 to 20, edited into a chronological story of healing that had never actually happened. In the book, Elaine described how she had guided me through a breakthrough using a technique she called compassionate mirroring. In reality, compassionate mirroring was her staring at her notebook while I cried, occasionally saying "Ememhem" or "Tell me more about that." I did not read these books. I saw them in airports, in bookstore windows, in the hands of women on the subway who underlined passages with yellow markers. I saw quotes from them tattooed on strangers' arms. I saw them recommended by celebrities who called Elaine a visionary. I saw my life, my blood, my worst nights, turned into inspirational posters and coffee mugs and online courses that cost $300. And then, 2 years ago, I received a package. It was a manuscript, a digital file sent to my work email with a subject line that said freelance editing opportunity. The sender was a major publishing house. The manuscript was 400 pages. The title was The Daughter I Healed. The author was Dr. Elaine Voss. I opened it at my desk at 9:00 p.m., alone in the office. I read the first chapter, then the second, then the third. By chapter 4, I was vomiting in the bathroom. It was my life, not fragments, not composites. My life, in first person, from Elaine's perspective. She described my first period as a traumatic event that required her therapeutic intervention. She described my first kiss as a boundary violation that she had helped me process. She described my miscarriage at 24, the one I had told her about in a session so raw I could not speak for an hour afterward, as a turning point in our therapeutic relationship where she had taught me to grieve as a mother grieves. She had never taught me anything. She had sat there, taking notes, while I bled out my soul. And then I found the poems. 3 of them, embedded in the text as examples of my artistic expression during recovery. Poems I had written in a notebook I thought I had lost at 21. Poems I had never shown anyone but her. She had kept them. She had typed them. She had placed them between chapters about her own wisdom, her own patience, her own maternal genius. I sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the tile, and I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. My mother did not see me as a person. She saw me as a franchise, and she was about to release the 4th installment. I did not call her. I did not confront her. I did not file a complaint with the state licensing board, though I could have. Elaine had connections. She had lawyers who specialized in making problems disappear. She had a fan base that would have called me an ungrateful daughter, a liar, a woman jealous of her mother's success. I had seen it happen before, to other people who had tried to challenge her. She was untouchable in the traditional ways. But I was an editor. I understood narrative. I understood timing. And I understood that the most dangerous thing you can do to a performer is give them the stage they asked for and then change the lights. I wrote back to the publishing house. I said I was interested in the freelance edit, but I would need to meet with the author directly to discuss the voice. I used my legal name, the one I had stopped using in professional contexts because it was too recognizable as hers. They scheduled a call. Elaine did not recognize my voice at first. I had trained myself to speak differently, lower and slower, the way one does when trying to disappear. But when she said, "I am looking for someone who understands the delicate balance of memoir and case study," I felt something cold settle in my chest. "I understand it," I said. "I have lived it." She hired me, not as her daughter, as her editor, as a consultant for her podcast, which was expanding into video. She needed someone to manage the production, to handle the technical details, to ensure that her image remained flawless across platforms. She needed someone invisible, competent, and loyal. She did not know she was hiring the ghost she had spent 20 years trying to exorcise. I moved back to the city. I rented an apartment 3 blocks from her office. I showed up to work every day with a smile that felt like a mask carved from ice. And I listened. I listened to her rehearse her empathy. I listened to her record segments about the importance of boundaries while she violated every boundary I had ever set. I listened to her accept sponsorships from wellness brands she openly mocked in private. I listened to her tell her assistant that the listeners were desperate housewives who needed to feel understood, and that her job was to give them the illusion of understanding without the inconvenience of actual connection. I listened to her sleep through sessions. This was the thing that broke me and then rebuilt me. Once a week, she recorded live therapy sessions for her premium subscribers. These were advertised as raw, unfiltered, real. In reality, she set up a camera in her office, invited a client who had signed a dense release form, and performed therapy for 45 minutes. I was in the control room, wearing headphones, adjusting levels, and I watched her drift off. Not dramatically, just a slow closing of the eyes, a nod that looked like deep listening but was actually microsleep, a gentle hum that she passed as reflective silence. Meanwhile, the client wept. The client confessed. The client laid their soul bare on the gray velvet couch, and Elaine slept through it, waking only when the timer buzzed to signal the end of the hour. I recorded this. I recorded everything. I recorded the conversations where she discussed how to make my miscarriage more emotionally resonant for the book launch. I recorded the emails where she negotiated with her editor about whether to include my suicide attempt in the prologue or save it for Chapter 6. I recorded the phone calls where she laughed about a listener's email, calling the woman pathetic for thinking Elaine actually cared about her. And I recorded the sessions, the ones from my own past. I found the files in her archive, labeled with my initials and dates, audio files that she had kept for years under the guise of professional record-keeping. I copied them, I transcribed them. I matched them line by line to the text of her books. I built a map, a timeline, a proof so dense and undeniable that even her most devoted fans would not be able to look away. But I needed the stage. And Elaine, in her infinite need for attention, was about to give it to me. The network had planned a special live episode. It was to be the launch event for The Daughter I Healed, broadcast from a theater in Manhattan, streamed to her 5 million subscribers, and promoted as a groundbreaking moment in mental health discourse. The title was Radical Honesty: When Therapists Fail. Elaine would interview another therapist about the dangers of countertransference and boundary violations, and then she would open the floor to a discussion about the importance of accountability in the healing professions. She was going to talk about failure. She was going to talk about honesty. She was going to perform the exact virtues she had spent 2 decades destroying. I made sure I was running the control booth. The night of the event, the theater was packed. 300 people in the audience, thousands watching online, sponsors' logos flashing on the screens. Elaine was wearing cream, because of course she was. Cream for the pure, cream for the healer, cream for the lie. She sat on stage with her guest, a therapist from California who had written a book about ethical therapy. They discussed the dangers of self-disclosure. They discussed the harm that comes when a therapist uses a client for their own emotional needs. They discussed, with furrowed brows and gentle voices, the sacred trust between healer and wounded. I sat in the booth, my hands on the mixing board, my heart a steady drum. I had changed the passwords that afternoon. I had uploaded the files to the projection system. I had given the lighting tech $100 to follow my cues. When Elaine opened the floor for questions, I pressed the first button. The screens behind her went black, then they lit up with a date. February 14, 2014, and then a voice, my voice, 16 years old, crying. I feel like a house with no doors. I sit in the kitchen and I stare at the knife because it is the only real thing. The audience gasped. Elaine turned, her face a mask of confusion that was almost funny. She thought it was a technical error. Then the screen changed. A page from The Wounded Healer, the same words, the same metaphor, highlighted in yellow. And beneath it, an email from Elaine to her editor. Tessa's knife metaphor tested very well with focus groups. Use it as the opener. I pressed the second button. The screen showed a video. Elaine in her office, eyes closed, head nodding while a client sobbed about her divorce. The timestamp ran in the corner. The audio was clear. The client was pouring out her heart. Elaine was asleep. I pressed the third button. The screen showed my journal, the poems, the pages photographed in my own handwriting, dated, fragile. And beside them, the typed versions in The Daughter I Healed, attributed to my artistic recovery under Elaine's guidance. I stood up. I walked out of the booth, down the stairs, onto the stage. The audience was silent. Elaine was standing now, her face white, her hands shaking. "Tessa," she whispered. I took the microphone from the stand, not from her hand, she had already dropped it. "My name is Tessa Voss," I said. My voice was steady. I had practiced this in 1,000 mirrors, in 1,000 nightmares, in 1,000 fantasies of revenge that I had never allowed myself to believe could be real. I am the daughter in The Daughter I Healed. I am the patient in The Wounded Healer. I am the girl in the kitchen, the girl with the knife, the girl who wrote the poems you typed into your book without asking. And I am here to tell you that the only thing you ever healed was your bank account. I looked at the screen. I looked at the audience. I looked at the cameras that were still streaming to thousands of people who had paid to watch this woman perform compassion. For 15 years, I paid your mortgage with my pain. I paid your book tours with my blood. I paid your podcast sponsors with my miscarriage, my addiction, my suicide attempt, and every word I spoke in a room that you told me was safe. You did not heal me, you mined me. You extracted my trauma and refined it into content, and you sold it to people who needed real help, and you gave them performance instead. I pulled out my phone. I had one last file. I pressed play, and my voice filled the theater, reading the email Elaine had sent to her publicist 3 days ago. Make sure the miscarriage chapter gets extra promotion. Mothers who have lost children are a highly engaged demographic. The audience made a sound. Not a gasp. Not a boo. The sound of a spell breaking. The sound of a congregation realizing their priest has been selling indulgences. You wanted radical honesty, I said. Here it is. You are not a healer. You are a plagiarist of pain. You are not my mother. You are my first and longest abuser, and I am done being your raw material. I walked off the stage. I did not look at her. I did not wait for security. I walked up the aisle, through the silent audience, out into the October night. The fallout was immediate. The sponsors pulled out within an hour. The publisher canceled the book the next day. The licensing board opened an investigation that they could not bury. Because too many people had seen the evidence, too many had recorded it, too many had shared it before Elaine's lawyers could send takedown notices. She lost her license. She lost her audience. She lost the empire she had built on my broken back. I did not sue her. I did not press charges. I did not need to. The court of public opinion had done its work, and I was tired of courts. I was tired of fighting. I was tired of being the daughter of a woman who had never seen me. Instead, I took the money I had earned from editing her manuscript, the money she had paid me for my silence and my labor, and I did something she would never have approved of. I spent it on therapy. Real therapy. With Dr. Patel, who was still in her cramped office, with her cat on the filing cabinet, with her rule about never writing while I spoke. I spent a year in that room, saying the things I had never been allowed to say, crying the tears I had never been allowed to cry, learning that my pain belonged to me and no one else. And then I wrote, not a case study, not a composite, a memoir, my words, my dates, my name on the cover. I wrote about the couch and the knife and the poems. I wrote about the miscarriage, not as a plot point in someone else's redemption, but as a loss that was mine alone. I wrote about my father, who built tables in Oregon and never sold my story. I wrote about Dr. Patel, who taught me that healing is boring and quiet and private. I wrote about the night I walked onstage and took the microphone, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to exist in my own voice. The book was published 6 months ago. It is not a bestseller. It will never be a bestseller because I do not have her platform, her connections, her talent for making pain look pretty. But it is mine. Every word, every comma, every scar. Last week, I did a reading at a small bookstore. 20 people came. They sat in folding chairs and they listened to me read the first chapter, the one about the gray velvet couch. When I finished, a woman in the front row was crying. She came up to me afterward and said, "I used to listen to your mother every morning. I thought she was saving me. Thank you for showing me that I could save myself." I did not know what to say. I am still learning how to accept gratitude that is not transactional, so I just hugged her. And then I went home to my small apartment, to my cat, to my silence. I am not healed. I do not know if I will ever be healed, but I am here, I am visible, and I am finally, the only author of my own pain. I am Tessa. I am 32 years old. And this is not the end of my story. It is the first chapter I wrote myself. See you in the next story.